Thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv on Saturday to vent their anger at the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His popularity has taken a significant knock in recent months over his handling of Israel's war on Gaza. Many accuse Netanyahu of seeking to prolong the war in an effort to cling to power. Protesters are calling for fresh elections blocked off a highway before police intervened to disperse the crowds. But elsewhere in Tel Aviv, demonstrators staged another weekly protest calling for the return of Israeli captives being held in Gaza. There are still more than 130 being held there. Well, Stefanie Dekker joins us live now from occupied East Jerusalem. Steffi, so yet more protests against Netanyahu and growing calls to get the captives released.
Yes, gaining momentum for the first time, the second time really, since the war started, since October the 7th. You had those anti-government, anti-Netanyahu protests resuming from what had been happening throughout the year. There's growing frustration with this government, at particularly the handling of the captive situation. You had tens of thousands yesterday also in Tel Aviv calling for the hostages to be brought back home, calling for this government to do more, calling for Netanyahu to stand down. He did speak. He was defiant. He addressed the country, saying that ahead of the 100 days, which is today, that the fighting will continue, that not The Hague, in reference to the International Court of Justice and charges of genocide, and not the axis of evil in reference to Iran and its proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas, will stop it, and they will continue. You also had the Israeli Army Chief of Staff address the nation. He specifically addressed a ceasefire and said that it wasn't time for a ceasefire, that it wouldn't be right to achieve Israel's goals, that plans had been approved for the continuation of fighting, and that was centered around the center and the south of the Gaza Strip. They also talked about massive budget allocation to the defense, to the military, to ensure that Israel keeps safe moving forward. But certainly this is something that people hear as you do have those growing calls to do more to bring the hostages back. And certainly while the fighting continues, it's going to be very difficult. Also, the chief of staff there hinting at covert operations that are undergoing to try and bring the captives back. But of course, that so far has not been able to be achieved.
Yes, Steffi, and after 100 days of war, what's the general public mood in Israel? I mean, arguably, Israel isn't any safer today than it was 100 days ago.
Absolutely, and what October the 7th did was really shake this country, shake Israelis at the core of their sense of security. This is a country that's been built on the sense of security. The Israeli army is officially called the Israeli Defense Forces. Prime Minister Netanyahu, for almost the past 20 years, has always sold himself as Mr. Security, as the only man to be able to keep Israelis safe. Well, the biggest breach of Israel's security happened under his watch. The mood here remains somber, remains sad. Most of the people do support this war, even though they're not happy with this government and with Netanyahu. He knows his days are numbered when the war ends. In fact, we just had a poll in the last 24 hours to show you those numbers. 28% believe that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is fit for the job. 51% are now backing Benny Gantz, the leader of the National Unity Party, as a man who could really lead Israel. So really those numbers plummeting, and they're plummeting more and more as time goes on. And this is something that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is very aware of. This is a man who brought in this far right-wing coalition as the only reason to be able to return to power, something that divided this country before October the 7th. There's so many layers here of Israeli politics, but if you bring it back to the October the 7th and the aftermath, yes, people are united behind this war, but they're certainly not united behind this government. And I think as time goes on and as the hostages are not brought back, you will see those calls grow louder and louder.
All right, Stefanie Dekker live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Steffi, thank you.